Procedurally generated, permanent death, roguelikes allow their unique mechanics to be incorporated into any genre, resulting in a sea of diverse games with infinite possibilities. And with new unique roguelikes being released every single day, I like to play and analyze the ones that may not have had the chance to shine yet. If that sounds interesting, welcome to the series where we learn what works, what doesn't, and why, all in search to find the next big roguelike.
Shape Shifter Formations. This seems to be an action twin-stick shooter with roguelike elements. Now, obviously, what caught my attention is the visuals. This is a very neon, crazy bullet hell looking game, and I haven't played one of those in a while. I really like bullet hells, and usually I'd say that it's pretty easy to make a bullet hell feel fairly empty and boring, but this game seemed to have a lot going for it and just looks kind of wild visually, so I'm excited to check it out. So let's take a look. And here we are. We've got a quick tutorial here. Oh, but we're already... Okay, so fire weapon, usability, dodge. Yeah! I need to do the rest. I'm sure I'll figure it out. So this is my basic weapon here. I did get to pick my ship and my weapon to start off with, which is nice, which gives a little bit of a player choice before a run. Few things to notice. I am collecting XP, so this seems to be like a horde-like. We do have common, uncommon, rare. So we got the usual. These are some pretty big numbers, I will say. Oh, we've got some stats. Oh, we've got stats, baby. There's a lot of stuff here. I'll try a shock thing going. Why not? Okay, that's my bomb. Now, how does my bomb regen? I don't know. I see a lot of bars in the bottom. So I do see my XP bar. That top bar is my recharge on the dash. A nice little visual indicator of when it's recharged. You can see the actual, screen goes a little yellow on the borders. That's quite nice. I like the fact that a lot of these also do come with downsides. I like this mechanic, risk versus reward kind of stuff. Strike 2 plus 2 per stack. Enemies every 4 seconds deals 50 damage and applies shock. There's a lot of information. Does that mean it has a passive thing, right? No, I still have to shoot. Oh, is it going to do it automatically again? Yes, so it is a little passive thing. That's what I figured. Ooh, I like the little visual of the walls changing on the side. Wow, this is already not what I expected. I mean, again, I didn't think this was an horde-like. That's cool. I'm getting all this lightning stuff. I'm wondering if it's a coincidence or not. I don't know. Let's take a look again at my bars down here. So where's my bomb? This is my bomb. So I can see it charging up. I think it's purely time-based. Okay. Boom! Okay, I just wanted to do that. That was satisfying. Now, once again, something to note is that this game is a roguelite. It seems to have a pretty heavy meta progression system, which we didn't really get to see much of yet, obviously. So I'm curious how much it's going to change once we're done with one run, right? So let's see this little guy. Hey, look at him. Look at him doing his thing. Now, I don't know if this scales with my... I really have a lot of questions in terms of how all the mechanics work because there's already so much stats and so many different things. I don't know what scales with what, how the scaling really works, all that stuff. Even though I have numbers in these upgrades, it's still a little unclear how a lot of things work. So this game seems to really try to go for elemental stuff, which is cool. So far, this is very easy, but I'm willing to bet it will get pretty chaotic. I also am curious how random this is, how much of a roguelike this is. I don't think I've noticed. I don't think I'm centered. I don't feel centered on the screen. Maybe I am. This is a game that really seems to go all in on mechanical upgrades that are very specific, that are just specific towards one kind of play style of different elements and stuff. I thought the numbers were pretty big on early on, but actually no, it was just the elemental numbers seemed big, but the overall number adjustment of things are not massive. Oh, this is going to be one of those games where I'm going to get a lot of achievements. Nice. Oh, these projectiles are a little spooky. Oh, but they're just going up and down. That's quite generous. They're bouncing. Does my XP disappear? I hope not. Generally do not like when XP just disappears in these kinds of games. I like having the XP always there and taking your time to get there. Unkill. Spawn a construct that fires 3 shots. That sounds pretty cool, actually. How well do you do? Okay, you don't stay very long, but you do the corrosion. The 10% is pretty big. I'm gonna hope that a lot of the bosses do... Oh, I thought my hurt box would be smaller. I thought I could get around that enemy. All right, so I took damage. I don't think I have a reliable way of healing right now without any of the meta progression. I wonder if I would imagine I have iframes. Also, boss coming. Boss. Here we go. Hello, Blockbuster. That's pretty funny. Nice. And you come with ads. I like this design. Thank you. Please, always add ads to your bosses in a horde-like. I like the music. Okay, I do have iframes. Confirmed. We have iframes, people, on our dash. That's good. I like it. How low am I? Oh, I'm low. Oh, wow. Okay, I can't outrun that. Well, cool. What do we get? Unlocked items can be found in the future round. So we unlocked some more items. Cool. So there's going to be the both kinds of meta progression. Good to know. Stats. These are the stats. Cool. Okay, let's exit. So here's our skill tree. Interesting. There's a lot of different, okay, we've got a lot of different things in this game. This seems to be a game really heavy on roguelike meta progression, right? So what do we have here? Wow. So just straight up plus 10% everywhere. Yeah, these are some pretty powerful upgrades already. Yeah, this is going to be a game that is going to require a bit of playing because I feel like I'm only scratching the surface. All right, let's just try again. I wonder what the interact button is for. Oh, God. Got it. Accuracy is indeed quite low. So now we're playing the stealthy sniper guy with a terrible accuracy weapon. Not sure if that was the best combination. One game that this reminds me of heavily is Nova Drift. And Nova Drift really is much more about like transforming your weapon, evolving your weapon into some crazy stuff. This doesn't really seem to be this case here, but I wonder if it will end up going this route. This seems much more like a potato thing where, you know, like, oh, I can go for like fire, I can go for construct, I can go for lifesteal, I can go for that kind of realm. I think we have to go for multiple builds. I can't go all in on one thing early on. Missile damage, they have like damage for everything. Missile strength, construct, orb strength. It's interesting to have so many different kind of like damage types. Usually I'm not an advocate for unkill, but there seems to be enough enemies during the boss so far that I think unkill might be good. All right, so let's see how it looks like. Oh, there's that missile, I think. Okay, oh, so the missile comes out of me, not the enemy I kill. Interesting. One thing I'm still very curious about is the changes in the level and bosses, the enemy diversity. I still don't know how diverse things are going to be throughout me playing. This does seem like a game where higher fire rate are more powerful just purely because there seems to be a lot of unhit effects. Usually unhit effects in a lot of these kinds of action roguelikes are a little busted because you could just get a really, really high rate of fire and you trigger things that do not scale with the unhit, right? So for instance, if I had a sniper that shot every 10 seconds and had an ability that deals X amount of damage flat, then naturally having a higher rate is better, right? Oh, I got a legendary construct. Spawn a construct that fires a missile every 2 seconds that deal a bunch of damage. Cool. While here, if I had the chance to deal like 10 damage on every hit, then naturally this gun is much more powerful in general. Usually the way to get around on-hit effects not being too broken is by having the on-hit effect scale with the weapon damage, which doesn't seem to be the case here. So I'm curious if it's going to feel much easier to do higher fire rate. So far, like, it seems like these are always the same enemies. I'm definitely curious how it'll change, and if it will change. And also if it's going to be the same boss. Shapeshifter incoming. Do they actually drop XP when they get destroyed like that? All right, round 2, buddy. I'm coming for you. Now I've got a way to heal and stuff. I feel like I'm oh, wait, you do projectiles? Did you always do projectiles? Wait, I feel like you didn't have projectiles last time. Am I crazy? Did I just not see the projectiles this entire time? Phase 2? Ah, this is a different variation of the boss, isn't it? How did I evade that? He's mad. Nice! Boss down! Woo! We killed the blockbuster for the first time! But I think I'll continue on my end so I don't spoil too much for anybody who wants to try this game. And I will circle back with my overall first impression thoughts on the game as a whole. Alright, so I ended up playing a few more runs, and each run I played a different character with a different starting weapon, unlocked more things to play with, so I got a pretty good idea of what the game has to offer. That being said, I was kind of right in saying that this game is very heavy in the meta progression, so I still feel like I only saw a tiny portion. And a good example of that proof is in the talent tree, where 2 of the talent trees I can't even have access to, even after having played for about 3 hours. So I'm going to be playing a lot more of this game post-stream, and I might add a comment down below talking more about it. But in the meantime, this is kind of what I expected, which I'm very happy. I didn't expect it to be a horde-like, so to say, but it is a very enjoyable bullet hell experience. What you see is probably what you're going to be getting if you know these kinds of games. So let's talk about the gameplay. So the gameplay is pretty straightforward. It is a horde-like, so you can move, cardinal movement, you can shoot, and in this instance, you are really being pushed to being able to aim and shoot. You could do it automatically, but the game defaults you to not doing it. But I like the fact that they gave you that option when I first started playing the game. You have a dash and you have an ability. Pretty standard stuff. In this instance, you start with a weapon, so you don't get more weapons throughout the run. You just have one weapon that you're going to be constantly upgrading and adding, you know, more benefits, the usual stuff. It's just a pretty solid horde-like in terms of gameplay. Not complaining. Now, throughout this little rant review, I'm going to be comparing the game a lot to Potato and Nova Drift. If you don't know any of these two games, I would highly recommend playing them because they're both really good. But I would say that this is where the game takes most inspiration. Visuals, obviously, were something that really dragged me into this game. That's why I wanted to showcase this, because visually the game looks very, you know, fun, chaotic. It's a big, flashy bullet hell, and that's what I got. I think the visuals are done really well. The fact that your character, the ship you're controlling, is always being lit by a little thing, always lighting things around you, and you're even like moving the geometry where you're going, which is really satisfying in that regard. I will say the bullets you shoot, I don't feel as satisfying as I would have hoped for. Looking at Nova Drift in that regard, I feel like Nova Drift's the bullets really do feel like the impact are juicy, right? But the overall visuals are really great. I'm not complaining. So does the sound design and the music also, solid, top notch. Nothing too major to talk about in that realm for me. Good stuff. Now, obviously, for a horde-like, the most important aspects is the roguelike elements. In this instance, you level up fairly quickly by killing enemies, collecting XP, and the rewards that are being given, there's a good mixture of stuff. I will say, I like the fact that the number adjustment upgrades tend to have a downside. I like that approach. That's something that Potato really relies on. That's why I feel like there was inspiration from that. And I think that's a cool aspect to have in these kinds of games, because it gives you a little bit more to think about as opposed to just like, oh, I like health, I'll just do this. So you have to actually think whether the downside is worth it. So there's a little bit more strategy in that regard. And the ones that are not number upgrades, but more like mechanical stuff, there's a lot in this game. There are a lot of different status effects. You've got your corrosion, your fire, your lightning, your orbs, which come with dark and light. There's a lot of different things to do. I will say, generally, because of the amount of information on screen, it's kind of hard to keep track of what everything really does. And that's something that I'll touch on a little bit later. It was hard for me to grasp exactly what Shock did, exactly what Frost did, exactly what Corrosion did. I got a good idea, but it wasn't as clear, even though everything was written down. But it was a lot of information, if that makes sense. But in general, it's cool that there were a lot of different paths to take for all these upgrades, whether I wanted to go for more Corrosion, Frost, and stuff like that. There seems to be a lot of support for different possibilities through the run, which I appreciate. Now, you do need to unlock a lot of these abilities to be able to find them through the run. But the good news is that there are a lot in this game. Usually I do complain that you're not going to be having a lot to start off with, and sometimes you always see the same thing. But here, nah, not so much. Currently, after 3 hours, I have 110 possible upgrades to find and 233 that are available in the game, which is crazy. That's a very, very high number. That's really cool. I'm excited to see all these crazy upgrades that I might unlock the more I play, because, man, I still have 113 to go. That's cool. That's exciting, I will say. That does make me want to keep on playing. Now, the actual run progression, so you're dropped into a level and you're going to be fighting enemies. You do see the same enemies fairly frequently. I will say there's not that a huge variety in enemies compared to the upgrades, which I would much rather have, to be honest. But once you've cleared enough enemies, you encounter the boss, you kill the boss, you move on to the next biome with higher difficulty enemies. You're going to be fighting the same enemies, but they have more health and deal more damage. Nothing too the ordinary. You are given a nice amount of upgrades. I do like the fact that you're constantly leveling up even throughout later in the run. It doesn't feel like you're going to be spending like 2 minutes before you can actually upgrade once you get to like past the mid game, which I really appreciate in this instance. And throughout the levels, you have to collect the XP. Now, this obviously is more like depending on the player. I myself don't love having games where experience points disappear at all, well, at least quickly. This game the experience points does disappear fairly quickly. It's kind of hard to know which kind of XP is going to disappear because it's a geometry game, so it's hard to see which of the XP I have to go for quickly before they disappear, just because there's so many of them scattered, and it's not clear which one is about to leave. Yes, they get smaller and smaller, but it's hard to really see that very clearly. I like when XP is always kind of there. In this instance, I understand why, because it's all about movement and you really do have to pick things up. The game is fairly slow for a horde-like, I would say, especially for a horde-like like this. I don't really move too fast, and I don't have to evade too many things at all times. And I would say that on average, I do feel like the levels seem a tad too long. I feel like getting to the boss faster would be a little nicer, just because I feel like since we're encountering the same enemies and the gameplay is still always going to be the same from the start to finish, depending on which character and build you're playing. In general, it's fairly repetitive. In this instance, I do wish it was a little faster, but I get it. This is only 3 hours in, so I could imagine a lot more is going to change if I continue playing, because I'm only scratching the surface, I believe. To me, on my first impressions, I would say that it's very enjoyable gameplay. It's fairly basic, but visually, your builds do really flashy things, even though I do wish that your gun would evolve throughout the run faster, kind of like in Nova Drift. Nova Drift, it's all about your gun. You're just evolving your gun, and it gets crazy by the end, even though you start with the same gun. I kind of wish they wouldn't go that far, but a little bit more. Usually my starting gun still feels fairly similar by the mid-game. I wish they could do more with the gun itself and build outside of all the status effects, because the status effects are a major deal in this game, which I appreciate, but I do wish the gun could also evolve with it faster. But overall, it's a very enjoyable game, and I could see the pacing being very exciting, because right now I wasn't able to get past the third boss, and I feel like I could upgrade so many things. So the game really does push you to keep on playing, and that's cool. This looks interesting to you, then odds are it's going to be a good time because I'm already excited to jump back into it. But I do want to also point out a more specific notes I wrote down about the game. These are more details that I wish were different, or just specific nuances here and there. So obviously, with this kind of visual, you're always going to have kind of a handicap as a developer. With such flashy 3D elements and all these different colors and stuff, it can get very chaotic to the point where it can be a little hard to see. Now, to be honest, I actually am surprised that I'm able to keep track of things fairly well, but there are still moments where a bullet might be behind a stack of enemies and I can't really see that there's an enemy that's about to hit me or a bullet that's about to hit me, so things can get a little confusing in that regard. Now, there are a lot of accessibility options and just options in general in this game, so that's really cool. But another thing that I thought was interesting in the visual department is the fact that the angle is not a top-down, right? It's a 3D, I forgot exactly what the viewpoint is called, but what ends up happening with this kind of viewpoint is that I can't really see what's under me very clearly. I can see what's above me and on the sides very easily, but the moment I have to go down is where I'm most likely to take damage, because my character is not in the middle of the screen. It's more like 2/3 down a lot of times, which doesn't feel great when I take damage from just an enemy that I just could not know was under me. Now, theoretically, I could stop shooting and then it would de-zoom, and that could be a way around it, but I would rather not stop shooting. I wish there was an easier way for me to see at all times what was under me, over me, wherever I want, because just purely south of the character is just danger zone because of the way the camera is angled in this particular game. And to bounce off of visuals, I guess, taking damage is a little weird in this game. Damage feedback isn't super clear to me. There's a little bounce and there might be a little sound, but it's not super clear. And in this game in particular, that felt a little off to me just because of the fact that taking damage is pretty dangerous, because you have barely any iframes. You can take like 3 damage in a row if you're not careful. And when you take damage, your character gets bounced off whatever enemy might have hit you. And that bounce is really dangerous, because the fact that you're moving all over the place and you're tiny and everything, when you get bounced off, you kind of lose a little bit of feedback as to where you are and have to move. And so taking damage in this game felt a little bit more punishing than a lot of other games. I wish there was a tiny bit more iframes, that you didn't get pushed back from enemies, so you could continue doing what you wanted to do. Because sometimes maybe you might just like try to go this way, but you get hit by an enemy, and then you immediately start going back towards that enemy because you were just bounced off, and you did take damage again. That makes sense? I think that's how it works. That's how I felt, at least. Also, your hurt box of your character is not very clear. Now, in Potato, I think one of the coolest things of Potato is the fact that you can just move around like enemies extremely well, and you can evade things, and it feels really cool not getting hit, and you're just like really calculating. Here, there were a lot of instances where I took damage from an enemy that was near me, and I thought it wouldn't hit me, but it did. I do wish the hurt box was a little smaller, or it was clearer. I don't know if me moving actually also moves the hurt box. I would hope not. I hope it's just a circle and not something that moves with me, because that would feel pretty hard to control. I guess a small detail, but in these kinds of games, these small details mean a lot. And again, that's just my view on my first impressions of playing. So once again, there's a lot of information in this game, and a lot of it is explained pretty well, but it's hard to sometimes find that information. There was no tutorial, which was surprising considering the amount of stuff there is in this game. Now, if you go in the home screen, there is a codex, and in the codex, there's a lot of information, but I do wish that some of this information that's in the codex would actually pop up as a window the first time you encounter certain things, because for instance, the status effects page on the codex really explains how all of these status effects work, but during gameplay, if I look at my stat page and I see all those status effects, they don't explain exactly what they do, and it gets a little confusing, even though you've got numbers and percentage, and shock chance does this, and shock damage, but then you get a certain amount, but you don't know if shock actually deals damage in its own, or if you have to only reach 100%. It's a lot, and I appreciate the amount of information in the codex, but I wish I would have had the option to at least see this myself without having to go in that little option menu, if that makes sense. Usually, I know not everyone loves having window pop-ups when you start playing. It can be a little annoying, but this is one of those rare cases where I wouldn't have minded because I was a little lost for a while. So back to the meta progression conversation, there is a lot of unlocks, which is great, but there's also actual permanent upgrades, right? And in this permanent upgrades, which they call skills, there's 3 different windows: the skill tree, the artifacts, and the paragon tree. I haven't unlocked the artifacts of the paragon tree yet, but the skill tree, where every single upgrade really gives you some massive benefits, and that felt cool to upgrade. But those benefits are very mechanical, which I love. Not just like you deal more damage, but some new mechanics, some new things are unlocked, right? And I really do miss, in this instance, pure number upgrades. I was surprised to not find them, and I realized that I think a lot of them are actually in the Paragon tree, which the Paragon tree is only available at level 35, which right now I'm at level 14, but 14 after 3 hours, and I can start upgrading my individual numbers after level 35. Seems like an odd choice to me. I think it would have been nice to be able to upgrade some of my little damage, even in small increments, which would be like a separate little currency, you know, plus 5% damage, or even lower than that, plus 2% movement speed. These kind of things I kind of wish I would have had. Again, I'm not an advocate for every single game to have these kinds of meta progressions, but in this instance, I felt like this would go really well with the game. And I do think that is the Paragon tree that is only unlocked after playing like, I guess, 6 hours. That was an interesting choice, I would say. I love the skill tree. I really think it's really interesting. I'm a little sad that the ones that are locked, because basically you can only unlock new abilities from the ones that are connected to ones that you unlocked, if that makes sense. But they already show you what all of them are, so you don't get the surprise of like unlocking a skill and then seeing what is the rest. You kind of already know everything, which, I don't know, I think it's nice to have the little surprise of having to upgrade the thing before to see what's next. It's a minor thing. I think the skill trees are cool. I'm excited to get the artifact and the Paragon tree, because I still don't know exactly what they do, but I do wish there was a little bit more given to the player faster. And I think the last thing is the boss design I want to talk about. I think the bosses are cool. The first boss was a really cool boss, I would say. The snake is nice. The snake feels very punishing if you don't have a good build, because you can't kill the things that heal it fast enough, similar to the snake in Gungeon for that matter. Then the third boss felt a little unfair, to me at least. It spawns these little enemies, and these enemies will shoot at you while the boss is doing a pattern attack, which feels like it's impossible to evade if you get unlucky. That felt a little mean. I was having really good build and I would just easily die to this because I just didn't feel like there was much I could do. Also, the first boss would spawn a bunch of minions, and I love that. I am an advocate for horde-likes to always have their bosses spawn mobs because you have a lot of abilities that trigger on killing enemies or spreading stuff or bouncing stuff. And this game has a lot of these. And let me tell you, when you get a bunch of unkill effects, it is so satisfying in this game. I love it. And so when I saw that the first boss came with a bunch of ads, I was like, oh, that's awesome design. But then the other bosses don't. And that seems so sad to me because that means, once again, any on-kill effect you get is going to be useless against certain bosses, and that just does not feel great in my opinion. I kind of wish that everything you use, is beneficial to bosses and mobs. Some better than others, obviously, right? You might have an effect that's like deal more damage to bosses. That's totally fair. But the on-kill effects and the bounces and the spreading, all these are so big in this game that I was so surprised to see that future bosses didn't have many mobs. I know that I'm keep on talking about that specific point in all the horde-likes I've played. I just really want to keep on bringing it up until, everyone keeps that in mind when designing these games, because I really do think it's just a shame to not have this kind of design when doing these bosses. And I guess one last point on the positive side, I think that the pre-run customization is great. That's where it comes back to, again, to Potato and Nova Drift that I really, really respect. You have different ships to pick with different guns, and there's a lot of them, and you can really create some unique things just from that by itself. And I think that's great because it means that every single run is going to feel pretty unique. And even when you start playing the game, you're going to be unlocking these pretty quickly, and I feel like right now, even though I played 3 hours, I'm going to play another run and it's going to be completely unique from the start, and I'm going to be doing that for a while. So I really like that, and I think they could go even further with some more unique ships and weapons, but I've got a feeling that the more I unlock them, the more they're going to be like that. So I just wanted to bring that up. So overall, Shapeshifter Formations was a blast. I can't wait to continue playing it. I do think there are certain elements here and there that could be improved, but nothing major. Overall, I think the overall experience is great, has a lot of content. This is one of those horde-likes with a ton of content. I haven't seen a horde-like with that much, and I feel like I'm still scratching the surface, so take a lot of my criticism with a grain of salt. I'm excited to unlock more, to see what happens when I beat the game, loops, all this stuff. There might be even more that I'm just missing out right now. But overall, gameplay is very solid, a lot of customizational options, a lot to unlock, great meta progression. There's just a lot to this game. I do feel like the gameplay itself is a tiny bit slow just because of how long it takes to get to the bosses. But overall, this is an absolute blast. And if you like just crazy, satisfying visual bullet hell experiences, then I would highly recommend checking this game out. It is currently fully out on Steam, so you can go check this out in the description below. Thank you once again for sending the game to the channel. We really appreciate it. If you have a game of your own that you want us to check out, there's a forum down below. And yeah, that's about it.